I learned that our campaign team is good at making predictions. They predicted at the very beginning that we were going to be about, that if we won the first by-election in 30 years in British Columbia as a government, that we would be about 500 votes ahead, and that's where we were.
You really risk that much on the chances of losing?
Well, I mean, that's, you know, the thing is that I wanted to get into the legislature as soon as I could, and that was the seat that was open. It was the only opportunity I had to get into the legislature. I think other premiers might have, or other people might have decided that they wanted to ask someone in a safe seat to resign. I preferred doing it the less expensive, more sensible way, and taking maybe the riskier route as a result of doing it, but you know, I felt it was a risk worth taking. The other thing was for me is I walked into it feeling confident we could beat the odds on the 30-year curse, because I felt like British Columbians were satisfied with lots of the changes that they've seen so far, things like raising the minimum wage and getting rid of the fees, parking fees in parks, and some of those other changes that we've made. I felt confident about the fact that British Columbians, when they got the people of Vancouver-Point Grey, when they got a chance to render judgment, would make it a positive one.
Was it a mistake to not do the alternative meeting?
You know, I think looking back on it, we were crunched for time, for sure, on that. And you know, the reason I ran is because I want to debate, and I want to get into the legislature and start debating Adrian Dix. And I have never, ever, ever shied away from those kinds of debates. So I'm looking forward to that. They were really tough calls to have to make, though, about the time that I had.
Was it the wrong call, though, Premier, in retrospect, if you'd just done it, gotten it over with, 2 hours, one evening, done, not an issue anymore?
Well, you know, I mean, I guess, you know, if it wasn't that issue, probably would have been another, right? We had an opponent there, and they were looking to try and find issues. I think one of the things that is notable about it is that was the issue that the NDP seized upon. And I think that does speak to the fact that when it comes to real content about government decisions that the NDP might have complained about, they didn't find a lot to complain about. Otherwise, we might have heard that.
What does
Premier,
the say
you
about the
almost
timeline
didn't
for a
win last
provincial
night.
election?
Is there nothing you would change about the campaign? Was there any mistakes made?
You know what? Because I won elections and I've lost elections, and the difference is when you lose an election, you sit down and you go through the 10 things you did wrong. And when you win an election, you think to yourself, I never did anything wrong. Well, that's never the case. In both cases, you always did at least 10 things wrong. It's just that you did enough other things right that that sometimes you win. So what I always do at the end of a campaign is we sit down and we say, whether we win or lose, we say, what are the 10 things we would have done differently? And there are always things you could have done differently. Always things you could have done differently. In this campaign, well, we haven't sat down and done that analysis yet.
You must have talked.
Well, listen, I got to bed at almost midnight last night after I got my kids' teeth brushed and into bed, so we're going to be sitting down and talking about those things. You know what? A lot of them are mechanics, for sure. You know, but the thing is no campaign is ever perfect. You never get to talk to every single voter, and I mean, I bet you if you talk to every member of the legislature that's been sitting there, some of them for 17 years, they'll be able to point out things that they would have done differently in all the campaigns that they've won, even the ones by landslides. I won in Port Moody with 75% of the vote in 2001. And when I look back on that, there were lots of things I would have done differently. But that's politics for you, right?
Can you talk about the timeline for the provincial election? Is this kind of this close, narrow win? Does that kind of take the wind out of your sails for an early election?
Are you kidding me? The fact that the government won the first by-election in 30 years, I think this is, I'm delighted with the results. And I think the New Democrats were probably pretty hopeful. I mean, the question I think that I would pose is, how come the opposition has won every by-election for the last 3 decades and they lost this one? And if they can manage to lose a by-election for the first time in 30 years, I think I'm feeling pretty confident about the future for some of the things that we want to be able to do. I'm feeling pretty confident about the way British Columbians are feeling about some of the changes we've been able to make.
You actually pulled in a smaller share of the vote than Gordon Campbell did in 2009.
1.4%.
But
1.4%.
nonetheless, your party put everything into winning this by-election, and you had a reduced share. You're the fresh face of the party.
Well, if you look at the numbers, what you'll see is this. First of all, as I said, the government hasn't won a by-election in 30 years. We held our vote. I mean, 1.4% down in the vote is a pretty small. I think any statistician would say we held our vote in this, which is pretty amazing for a by-election. If you go back to the last by-election that a government won 30 years ago, which was Claude Richmond, the government lost 7 points. Now, so in between then and now, the opposition has always won every single by-election. So I think we did really well in holding our vote. There is a lesson in this, though, and that is that even when we hold our vote, we can't count on the opposition being divided. And so the lesson, I think, for people who support kind of a reasonable, moderate, free enterprise government in British Columbia is that we have to stick together if we want to be able to beat those guys.
Premier, isn't the reason why governments lose by-elections is because voters can protest without any cost. They know they can vote against the government, and the government won't fall, it'll be stable, it'll be steady. And this one, they realized that if they vote against you, we could be in a snap election, we could be in another leadership race. I mean, is this really the same as those by-elections the last 30 years? You seem to be trumpeting this as a victory, but can you really compare them?
Yes, I think you can. I mean, there's always something different in every by-election that you find, but in this case, I mean, in any case, if a government wins a by-election or loses a by-election, and you go back and look at all the by-elections that have happened when it's been close or when the media has presented it as a commentary on the government, you will find people who say, my goodness, this could be what's going to precipitate a snap election. And that happens, that's always part of the talk of a by-election race. So, you know, I think this was a chance for voters in a swing riding, which has always been a swing riding, it's been held by the NDP in the past for sure, to make a comment on the changes that I've been making since I became Premier for the last 2 months. And, you know, instead of rejecting those changes, instead of deciding that they wanted to send the government a message, which is what British Columbians have done for 3 decades, for most of my life, they decided that they wouldn't do that. They decided that they would send me into the legislature, I think, with an endorsement that some of the changes that we're making are on the right track. So I'm really pleased about that.
Will you run in this riding again in the general election? You plan to stay in Point Grey?
I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping to be able to move a little bit farther west, although, you know, the thing is for me, like move my home. Thing is for me, moving isn't, as you know, anybody who's got little kids, it's not something that you do in a week. So it's something that I'm thinking about. I'm not sure what the future is going to hold. And I don't know when a general election might be, so
When are you going to
there's
sit
a lot of ifs there.
in the House?
Well, that's going to be up to the Chief Electoral Officer and to the Speaker, obviously, because they're the ones that are going to be responsible for returning the writ. And I guess there are some absentee ballots that, of course, still need to be counted, and I don't know what the timing is going to be for that. So the sooner I can get into the legislature, the better, from my perspective.
Are you gonna run a negative campaign in the next provincial election like the one you did here?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, in this one, from the very beginning, I was knocking on doors and people were saying to me, you know, I just talked to a New Democrat who told me that you are going to cancel Medicare. And I talked to senior citizens who were telling me that, and they were scared by that. And that was how the campaign started off. And, you know, it's like, I just think it's one thing to say things that are true about other people. It is another thing to say, it's another thing to try and just scare people by lying. And that's what we saw, I think, from the New Democrats from the very beginning in this campaign. And so I was pretty disappointed by that. I think that talking about where people stand on issues, and sometimes it's controversial, is perfectly legitimate. But I think lying about what people are going to do really crosses the line.
Are you going to take a leadership role in the fight to save the HST?
Well, I'm certainly involved in it in a big way. I've been talking to British Columbians about, and I talked to a lot of people in Vancouver-Point Grey about this. Like, let's not forget, in Vancouver-Point Grey, there were a lot of people that were upset about the way the HST was introduced, as just like there are everywhere else. People are upset with some of the real irritants that they see in it. And so I talked to a lot of people on the phone who wanted to know what we're doing with the HST and whether or not we're going to do anything that would make it possible for them to vote for it. And that was certainly a factor in this campaign too. I'm certainly involved in the campaign, and I'm telling people, as I did for the year I was on radio after it was introduced, that I think it's a tax that is going to benefit the British Columbia economy overall. But our challenge is to find ways to try and fix the irritants and the things about the HST that don't work for people. That is the challenge that we have. And so we're in this listening process now, and as you know, Kevin Falcon and Blair Leckstrom and other ministers are out doing things like telephone town halls. They were talking to tens of thousands of people and getting a lot of feedback, a lot of the things that I heard in Vancouver-Point Grey about how we might fix it. And so I'm very much involved in the decisions about, once we bring that information in, what are we gonna do with it? How are we going to shape it, and what are we gonna do to make sure that we offer British Columbians some fixes for the HST that might make it work a little bit better if they decide to vote for it in a referendum.
Can we expect to hear more about this plan to fix the HST at the convention this weekend?
I don't think it'll be quite that quick. You'll hear about it soon though, because we need to move on it quickly. Obviously, the date is June 24th, when everybody's gonna receive their ballots. There will be some news at the convention though, Jeff, are you going?
Policy statements, major.
We have to wait and see. It's gonna be, you know what? The thing is that we are reinvigorating the BC Liberal Party, and there are going to be real debates about real policies coming to the floor, and it's going to be really unstifled, open debate, and you never know what's going to happen. I think it's gonna be fun.
Premier, your first win in the by-election in 30 years for government, you're reading that as a green light to call an early general election true or false?
When I love it when you get to choose the answers and the question as well.
The choice is yours.
Yes, the choice is mine. When I ran for leader, I was really clear with people that I was going to call a general election sooner than the fixed election date. That hasn't changed.
Premier, I have to ask you about education. I'm very sorry. I'm Jim Beatty's minion this morning, so,
Really? Where's Jim today?
I don't know.
He was still there when I left last night at 11:30.
Still sleeping.
Really?
I'm here. I have to ask you about the BC Teachers Federation calling on you to restore funding to Bill 27 and 28 levels in order to prevent shortfalls later on, and are you going to do that?
Well, we're working, I know that George Abbott is working hard with all the stakeholders in education. He's creating a new relationship with the Teachers Federation, which is great. And so those are things that, those are the things that we are discussing right now. The budget is really tight. We are also in bargaining. With not just the teachers, but a number of other groups. And we need to find out where we're at with the HST as well. So,
can you reassure parents in your riding now in Vancouver-Point Grey and parents in the Vancouver School District that they won't be looking at school closures and cuts in the coming year?
well, you know what? The thing is, for the school district is the level of government that is going to decide when they're opening and closing schools. That's always been what's happened in British Columbia. So they will make those decisions, and I can't predict what they're going to do with that. They're projecting cuts. In the parts of Vancouver where the population is growing, you'll probably see some additions to schools, and in the parts of Vancouver where the population is shrinking, you may see the opposite. That has been the way education has worked in this province for a long time. You go to a place like Surrey, which has been consistently growing over the years in their school population. Because the population is shifting there, they've been closing schools and opening them over the last 30 years as well. So those are decisions that the school board is going to make.
Thanks, guys.
So, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. All right.